She thought she could humiliate his childhood nanny, a woman who built his family's legacy with her bare hands, and walk away with no repercussions? But the millionaire did something no one expected. This is a story about loyalty, betrayal, and the unbreakable bonds that define who we truly are. A story that will challenge what you think you know about power, family, and what it truly means to be seen. Stick around, because by the end, you'll understand why some victories are louder when won in quiet dignity, and why the truest wealth is never measured in gold. The gravel crunched rhythmically beneath the tires of the sleek black Mercedes, a sound that, for Malcolm Sterling, was the true soundtrack of home. Oak Haven Estate. Not just a sprawling collection of stone and timber, but a living, breathing testament to generations of dreams, struggles, and triumphs. Its ancient oak trees, gnarled and wise, stood guard over manicured lawns that rolled like velvet carpets towards the horizon. The main house, a magnificent federal-style mansion, rose majestically, its grand columns and symmetrical windows reflecting the afternoon sun like knowing eyes. For Malcolm, who had built his tech empire from a humble garage to a global powerhouse, Oak Haven was more than just property. It was the quiet, dignified anchor in a world of fleeting trends and dizzying speed. It wasn't about ostentatious displays of wealth. It was about heritage, about the roots that ran deeper than any Silicon Valley startup, roots that held generations of sterling ambition and resilience. Years had passed since Malcolm had last breathed the hallowed air of Oak Haven. Years spent chasing the relentless beast of success, forging his name in the unforgiving fires of innovation. He'd conquered boardrooms, outmaneuvered rivals, and built a fortune that dwarfed even his family's considerable legacy. Yet, as the Mercedes rolled closer, a familiar mix of nostalgia and a profound, almost spiritual reverence settled over him. He was returning not just as a man of immense success, but as a husband, and the weight of that new title felt surprisingly heavy. Beside him, Serafina Monroe, his wife of 6 months, sat poised, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing the cool leather interior. She exuded an almost ethereal elegance, a woman sculpted from modern luxury, every detail of her appearance curated to perfection. She had been utterly thrilled by the idea of marrying into one of America's wealthiest families, envisioning a life of endless opulence and elite social circles. But the moment Oak Haven's magnificent facade came into view, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift crossed her flawless features. Her lips, usually set in a charming smile, pursed ever so slightly. It was grand, certainly, undeniably opulent, but to her discerning, contemporary eye, it felt antiquated. She'd envisioned minimalist glass and steel, soaring ceilings that screamed new money. Oak Haven whispered old soul, and in that quiet, resonant whisper, Serafina heard a discordant note. Malcolm noticed the subtle shift, the almost imperceptible tensing of her shoulders. He told himself it was just Serafina adjusting to the grandeur, the sheer scale of the estate. He tried to dismiss the flicker of unease that sparked within him, a flicker quickly extinguished by the overwhelming joy of returning home. But as the car glided to a halt in front of the sweeping front steps, his eyes sought out another figure, a figure that embodied the very soul of Oak Haven. And there she was, Mrs. Eleanor Ellie Vance. She stood on the porch, a vision of quiet grace, her dark skin glowing in the afternoon light, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Ellie wasn't just the Sterling family's housekeeper, or even just Malcolm's childhood nanny. She was the unseen pillar, the enduring soul, the very heartbeat of Oakhaven. Her hands, calloused and strong, had nurtured generations of Sterlings, from toddlers taking their first wobbly steps to teenagers grappling with existential angst. Her eyes, deep and knowing, held stories that predated even Malcolm's grandparents, tales of triumphs and quiet sorrows woven into the very fabric of this land. Ellie moved with a calm dignity, a quiet authority that commanded respect without ever demanding it. She was the keeper of traditions, the source of comfort, the unwavering constant in a world of dizzying change. "Malcolm, you're home, dear boy!" Ellie's voice, a warm, resonant hum, carried across the gravel. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the air with an authority no boardroom could match. Malcolm, usually so composed, felt an uncharacteristic rush of emotion. He practically leaped from the car, meeting her with a heartfelt embrace. He could feel the familiar softness of her hands, the comforting scent of lavender and old books that always clung to her. "Ellie," he murmured, his voice thick with genuine affection. "It's good to be home." Serafina, meanwhile, had elegantly exited the car. Her smile, though practiced, felt stiff as she extended a manicured hand towards Ellie. "And you must be Mrs. Vance," she said, her tone smooth, almost saccharine, but with an underlying coolness that made the air feel thin. "Malcolm has told me so much about you. Such a fixture." The word hung in the air, seemingly innocuous, yet carrying a subtle dismissive weight. A fixture, something inanimate, permanently attached, perhaps even outdated. Ellie simply smiled, her eyes deep and knowing, meeting Serafina's for a beat longer than polite. "Welcome to Oakhaven, Mrs. Sterling," she replied, her voice calm, utterly unruffled. The moment passed, a barely perceptible tremor in the grand tapestry of Oakhaven, but for Malcolm it was a discordant note. He saw the subtle glint in Serafina's eyes, a fleeting flash of something he couldn't quite place. He told himself it was just a misunderstanding, a clash of worlds. Ellie, after all, was old school, and Serafina, well, Serafina was a force of modern nature. But deep down, a familiar unease began to stir. He remembered countless times as a child when Ellie had been his unwavering refuge. Like the day he'd fallen from the ancient oak tree, a nasty gash on his knee and tears streaming down his face. His parents, ever busy, had dispatched their personal physician. But it was Ellie who had gently cleaned the wound, applied a cool cloth to his forehead, and sat by her bedside, humming soft spirituals until his fever broke. Or the time he was bullied at prep school, returning home bruised and broken, it was Ellie who had listened patiently, offering not just comfort, but quiet words of strength. "Son, some battles you fight with your fists, but the hardest ones you fight with your spirit, and yours is unbreakable." This wasn't just employment, it was a sacred bond, forged in moments of vulnerability and reinforced by decades of mutual respect. It was the unspoken contract between wealthy black families like the Sterlings and their dedicated black domestic staff like Ellie. A shared understanding, a profound love born from a collective history of struggle and hard-won success. Ellie wasn't just a part of the household, she was family, in every sense of the word. Little did Malcolm know, the gentle rhythms of Oakhaven, those melodies of loyalty and tradition, were about to be violently disrupted. A force had entered the gates, a force that saw history as an inconvenience, genuine connection as weakness, and loyalty as a mere obligation. And soon, that force would begin to chip away at the very foundation of Oakhaven, threatening to dismantle the unseen pillars that held it all together. The seemingly innocuous pleasantries on the porch were merely the first notes in a symphony of discord, leading to a crescendo that would force Malcolm to finally see the true meaning of home and the sacrifices it sometimes demanded. The initial days at Oakhaven settled into a delicate, almost unspoken truce. Serafina, ever the strategist, observed. She moved through the estate with the sleek grace of a predator, her eyes scanning every detail, not for beauty or history, but for anything that didn't fit her meticulously crafted vision. And what she saw was a house that was grand, yes, but also utterly outdated. Her grand plans for Oakhaven were not just about renovation, they were about a complete reimagining, a brutal divorce from its past. She envisioned stark, minimalist spaces, abstract art replacing ancestral portraits, and smart technology stripping away the need for human touch. It was a cold, calculating aesthetic, a stark contrast to the warm, lived-in essence of Oakhaven. Ellie, with her quiet traditions and her deep roots in the Sterling family's history, quickly became the central flaw in Serafina's perfect blueprint. To Serafina, Ellie wasn't just an employee, she was the embodiment of everything Serafina despised. A relic of a bygone era, a living reminder of a past that Serafina had no part in, and a quiet authority that subtly challenged her own. Serafina, who had clawed her way to the top of the social ladder, saw Ellie not as a respected member of the household, but as the help, a subservient figure who somehow commanded more unspoken respect than she, the new Mrs. Sterling, did. The attacks began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like tiny, venomous pricks. Serafina would leave demanding lists of instructions for Ellie, filled with impossible timelines and condescending suggestions. She would make snide comments about old-fashioned ways during staff meetings, her gaze pointedly lingering on Ellie. Malcolm, caught between his new life and his deep-seated affection for Ellie, tried to ignore it. He convinced himself Serafina was just adjusting, that she didn't understand Oakhaven's unique dynamics. He'd rationalize, Ellie is strong, she can handle it. But how many times do we, like Malcolm, witness injustice and choose silence, believing we're preserving peace, when in reality, we're just enabling further harm? This avoidance, this fear of uncomfortable confrontation, often lays the groundwork for far greater pain. The first major incident arrived with the deceptive elegance of a poisoned chalice. It was during a lavish dinner party, Serafina's debut as the Lady of Oakhaven. The dining room gleamed with crystal and silver, and laughter tinkled like fragile bells. Ellie, ever present, moved gracefully among the guests, ensuring every detail was perfect. As she leaned in to serve a prominent senator, Serafina, with a sudden, seemingly clumsy gesture, accidentally knocked over a glass of expensive red wine, splattering a dark crimson stain across the pristine white of Ellie's uniform. "Oh dear, Mrs. Vance," Serafina exclaimed, her voice dripping with false concern, though her eyes held a spark of triumph. "Oh dear, Mrs. Vance, I suppose you must be more careful when serving in such close quarters. Perhaps you should change immediately. You wouldn't want to mar the aesthetic." The subtle emphasis on "mar the aesthetic" was a direct public cut. Malcolm saw the shock in Ellie's eyes, the slight stiffening of her shoulders, before she quietly excused herself. He felt a pang of shame, a flush of discomfort, but he said nothing, lost in the hum of conversation and the desperate hope that it would all just blow over. He chose peace at the expense of principle. The silence from Malcolm was a heavier stain than the wine. It spoke volumes to Ellie, a woman who had taught him right from wrong, how to stand up for the vulnerable. And it spoke volumes to Aunt Beatrice and Silas, Malcolm's stern but loving aunt and her sharp-witted cousin. They were the true guardians of Oakhaven's spirit, and they watched Seraphina with a quiet, simmering disapproval. Aunt Beatrice, with her direct gaze, cornered Malcolm later that evening. "That girl has a way of making old things feel burdensome, Malcolm," she said, her voice low, "even people who are the very essence of this home." Silas, always more cutting, added, "You know, Malcolm, some foundations are best left untouched. They carry the weight of generations. You wouldn't want to find yourself without a floor, would you?" Their words were warnings, a gentle hand on his shoulder, urging him to see. But Malcolm, blinded by the newness of his marriage and the avoidance of conflict, still looked away. The subtle aggressions continued, slowly chipping away at Ellie's calm exterior. Seraphina constantly suggested Ellie update her recipes, implying her traditional Southern dishes were too heavy or unrefined for their sophisticated guests. Then came the second incident, another seemingly innocent mishap. During a brunch, Seraphina deliberately confused a tray of Ellie's legendary sweet potato pie, a recipe passed down through generations, a culinary symbol of Ellie's heritage, with store-bought pastries. "Oh, these old-fashioned things," Seraphina scoffed, loud enough for guests to hear. "I told Ellie we needed something lighter, but she insisted on these. So quaint." The public ridicule of Ellie's cultural heritage, her skill, her very essence, was a calculated blow. Ellie's face remained impassive, but Malcolm from across the room saw the nearly imperceptible tremor in her hand as she moved to clear the table, the subtle shift in her posture, the weariness that deepened in her eyes. It was a dignity so profound it shamed Malcolm to his core. Ellie never complained. She never raised her voice or made a scene. Her suffering was an internal fire, burning quietly, reflected only in a slower gait, a deeper sigh when she thought no one was listening, a distant look in her eyes, as if remembering a time when Oakhaven felt truly like home. Her dignity was a shield, yes, but even shields can crack under relentless assault. She was a woman of immense strength, but even the strongest foundation can be eroded by constant, subtle attacks. The air in Oakhaven grew thin, charged with unspoken resentments. Seraphina's disdain was a chilling current, Malcolm's silence a heavy blanket, and Ellie's quiet endurance a ticking clock. A storm was brewing, not just outside the grand windows, but within the very heart of the estate. And Malcolm, still hoping it would pass, was standing right in its eye. The stage was set, the tension palpable, for a public display of cruelty that would force Malcolm to finally choose a side, a choice that would irrevocably alter the course of Oakhaven and the lives within it. The night of the Oakhaven Gala arrived cloaked in a deceptive shimmer. Chandeliers blazed, casting a golden glow over the grand ballroom, illuminating a sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits. Malcolm, a paragon of quiet confidence in his tailored tuxedo, moved through the throng of influential guests, a forced smile plastered on his face. This was Seraphina's stage, her moment to shine as the new mistress of Oakhaven. She had spared no expense, orchestrating every detail with an almost obsessive perfection, from the imported orchids to the classical quartet, all designed to showcase her impeccable taste and elevated status. But beneath the veneer of polished elegance, a suffocating tension hummed, a current that only a few truly felt. Ellie, a silent, graceful shadow, moved through the same opulent space, ensuring every guest had what they needed, every glass filled, every detail accounted for. Seraphina, however, saw Ellie's quiet efficiency not as a strength, but a provocation. This was her night, her house, and Ellie, with her inherent dignity and deep-rooted history, stood as an unwanted counterpoint to Seraphina's fabricated image of effortless control. The moment came with a chilling, calculated precision. Seraphina, flushed with champagne and the adulation of her admiring guests, cornered Ellie near the antique fireplace. She had gathered a small, exclusive circle of Malcolm's most important business associates and social peers, individuals whose opinions Malcolm deeply valued. Ellie, ever vigilant, was merely adjusting a floral arrangement nearby. "Oh dear Mrs. Vance," Seraphina purred, her voice carrying just enough to capture the attention of her captivated audience. Her words were sugar-coated poison. "You know, Malcolm and I have been discussing the future of Oakhaven. It's time for modern approaches. Wouldn't you agree?" She paused, her eyes sweeping over Ellie's traditional uniform, lingering on her sensible shoes. "Such quaint, shall we say, vintage methods you employ, so endearing." A nervous ripple went through the small circle of guests. They exchanged uncomfortable glances, sensing the malice beneath the polished words. No one dared to intervene. Seraphina pressed on, her voice rising slightly, now tinged with mock concern. "I told Malcolm, darling, that while your loyalty is commendable, perhaps your, well, efficiency could use an update. It's simply not practical for such a grand estate in this day and age, is it? We need someone who understands the demands of modern luxury, not relics." The word relics hung in the air, a cruel, public dismissal of Ellie's entire existence, her life's work. Seraphina even subtly gestured at Ellie, as if she were an outdated piece of furniture. Malcolm, who had been chatting with a senator nearby, felt the words like a physical blow. He froze, the laughter dying in his throat. He saw it all, Seraphina's performative concern, the triumphant glint in her eyes, the averted gazes of his friends, and most devastatingly, the sudden, profound exhaustion that washed over Ellie's face. Her shield of dignity, usually unbreachable, wavered for a split second, revealing a flicker of raw hurt, a deep, silent wound in her wise, weary eyes. It was a pain Malcolm instantly recognized, a pain he was acutely aware he had indirectly caused with his own cowardly silence. Every memory of Ellie's unwavering kindness, her tireless devotion, her steadfast presence in his life flashed before his eyes. He saw her tending to his scraped knees, teaching him to read, offering quiet wisdom when his own parents were too distant or too busy. He remembered her steadfast strength, the way she had always stood tall, even when the world around her tried to shrink her. And now she was being reduced to a relic by the woman he had chosen to marry. A wave of shame, hot and suffocating, washed over Malcolm. Was this the man he had become? A silent accomplice to the degradation of the woman who had helped raise him, simply to appease a wife who brought nothing but discord? This was not a private disagreement. It was a public execution of Ellie's dignity. The silence that followed Serafina's final cutting remark was deafening, heavier than any physical blow. Malcolm's heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the weight of every silent moment, every avoided glance, every rationalization he had ever made. He had chosen peace over principle, and now that choice was shattering the very foundation of his life. Then something shifted. A primal roar erupted within him, a refusal to let the woman he loved, the woman who was family, be trampled underfoot. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of stale fear and burgeoning resolve. Just as Serafina was about to deliver another cruel blow, perhaps a final dismissive wave of her hand, Malcolm stepped forward. Not with a shout, not with a dramatic scene, but with a quiet, firm voice that cut through the strained silence like a laser. Serafina. Malcolm's voice, though low, resonated with an undeniable authority. His eyes, usually guarded, now blazed with a cold, clear fury. He looked directly at his wife, then turned his gaze to Ellie, his expression softening to profound respect. That's enough. He then faced the stunned guests, his voice gaining power. Mrs. Vance has been the backbone of this family for over 50 years. Her worth is not measured by trends, by fleeting fads, or by the shallow judgment of those who lack her depth. Her worth is measured by loyalty, by love, by unwavering dedication, by a life built on service and a heart filled with compassion. Something, it seems, he paused, letting his gaze fall back to a stunned Serafina, you know absolutely nothing about. The reaction was instantaneous. Serafina's perfectly composed face fractured, her eyes widening in disbelief and fury. The guests murmured, a mixture of shock and relieved understanding rippling through the crowd. Some discreetly turned away, others watched, transfixed. Ellie, who had braced herself for the next volley of insults, slowly raised her head, her eyes meeting Malcolm's. In his gaze, she saw not just defense, but a profound, desperate apology, a silent promise of change. Serafina, her face now a mask of rage, stormed out of the ballroom, her departure a dramatic exit, though it was utterly overshadowed by the quiet power of Malcolm's words. The party, for all intents and purposes, dissolved into awkward whispers and rapid departures. Malcolm found himself standing alone, the echoes of his declaration hanging in the air, the silence that followed now a palpable testament to the profound choice he had finally made. He had broken the facade, shattered the silence, and in doing so had irrevocably altered the course of Oakhaven. The comfort of his inaction was gone, replaced by the daunting, liberating weight of his newly reclaimed integrity. The echo of Malcolm's words hung in the air, a declaration that would irrevocably alter the course of Oakhaven and the lives within it. The morning after the disastrous Oakhaven Gala dawned with a chilling, oppressive silence. The grand ballroom, once teeming with life and laughter, now felt cold and desolate, strewn with discarded napkins and half-empty glasses, ghosts of a shattered illusion. The air itself seemed to hum with unspoken tension, a stark contrast to the previous night's forced gaiety. Malcolm, despite the immense weight in his chest, felt a strange clarity. The haze of avoidance had lifted, replaced by a searing, undeniable truth. He found Serafina in her lavish dressing room, meticulously packing an expensive carry-on, her movements sharp and deliberate. Her back was to him, her posture rigid, radiating a furious indignation. She didn't need to turn to know he was there. "Well," she began, her voice a low, dangerous growl, "I hope you're pleased with yourself, Malcolm. You chose the help over your wife, in front of everyone." Her tone was laced with pure venom, a shocking lack of remorse. She finally turned, her eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was, to be publicly shamed by my own husband for trying to bring this relic of a house into the modern age? For trying to elevate your life?" Malcolm looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not the beautiful, sophisticated woman he thought he'd married, but a cold, entitled stranger. The spell was broken. "Humiliation, Serafina," he stated, his voice calm, devoid of anger, which only seemed to fuel her rage. "That is what you call what you did to Ellie, because what I witnessed last night, and for months before, was not about modernity. It was about cruelty. It was about intentionally breaking a kind, loyal soul. And I stood by and let it happen." He clenched his jaw. "My silence was my greatest regret." Serafina scoffed, turning back to her packing. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. She's a servant, Malcolm. A sentimental attachment from your childhood. You're confusing loyalty with necessity. I am your wife. I am your future. And you chose to disgrace me for some outdated sentimentality?" Malcolm walked closer, his voice dropping, gaining an iron edge. "No, Serafina. I chose Oakhaven. I chose its values. I chose the very foundation of my family, which includes the people who built it, nurtured it, and loved it long before you ever stepped foot here. You saw Ellie as a burden, a problem to be eliminated. I see her as family, and family is non-negotiable." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Our marriage, Serafina, was built on an illusion I helped create with my own inaction, but that illusion is over." Serafina froze, a silk scarf half folded in her hand. What are you saying?" she whispered, a flicker of genuine fear finally crossing her face. "I'm saying," Malcolm continued, his voice firm, "that our marriage is over. I've already instructed my legal team to begin divorce proceedings. You will be provided for, of course, a generous settlement." He gestured around the opulent room. "But Oakhaven is no longer your home. You will leave today." The words hit Serafina like a physical blow. She staggered back, dropping the scarf. You can't," she gasped, her voice shrill. "You're throwing me out? For her? For the help?" Disbelief warred with a simmering fury. She had truly believed her status, her beauty, her ambition made her untouchable. But Malcolm, no longer the compromised man, simply met her gaze, unwavering. This was not just the end of a marriage, it was the shedding of a heavy burden he had unknowingly carried. Sometimes the most difficult choices are the ones that lead to true freedom and peace. As Serafina, defeated and enraged, continued her frantic packing, Malcolm sought out Aunt Beatrice and Silas. He found them in the sun-drenched breakfast nook, sipping tea, their faces etched with concern. He didn't offer excuses, he confessed. He laid bare his cowardice, his silence, his shame. "I was a fool," he admitted, his voice raw. I let myself dishonor everything this house and Ellie stands for. I should have spoken up the first time. The second, I should have defended her. And now..." I'm afraid I've lost her." Aunt Beatrice reached across the table, her hand resting gently on his. "Sometimes, Malcolm," she said, her voice soft but firm, "we have to lose something precious to truly see its worth. And sometimes the hardest battle is fought within ourselves. Your silence was a heavy cost, but your words last night, those were the words of the man you were always meant to be." Silas, usually quick with a sarcastic jab, simply nodded. "You did the right thing, cuz. It took you long enough, but you finally saw it. Some things are more valuable than gold. And Ellie, she's pure gold." But Malcolm's heart still ached with a different kind of pain. He had not seen Ellie since the gala. He had assumed she was simply avoiding him, perhaps waiting for the dust to settle. But then, as he walked through the quiet, familiar halls of Oakhaven, he saw it, a small, neatly folded note on the antique side table in the main hall, placed precisely where she always left messages. It was addressed to him, in Ellie's familiar, elegant script. He tore it open, his hands trembling. Her words were simple, yet they cut deeper than any accusation. "My dear Malcolm, Oakhaven has always been my home, and your family my family. But the air here has grown too thin for me to breathe. My heart is too weary to mend the cracks that have formed. I have loved you since you were a boy, and I always will. But for now I must seek my own peace. With love, Ellie." A cold dread washed over Malcolm. Not a complaint, not an angry word, but a quiet, dignified retreat. Ellie hadn't just left the room, she had left Oakhaven. She had chosen her own peace, a decision born of profound weariness and self-respect. And it was a consequence of his inaction that he now had to face. The discovery of Ellie's note hit him harder than the confrontation with Seraphina. He had lost her, not to another woman's spite, but to his own cowardice. The house felt emptier than it had after Seraphina's departure, a profound void where Ellie's quiet presence had been. He knew, with an absolute certainty, that he had to find her. This wasn't just about bringing her back to Oakhaven, it was about atoning for his silence, about proving that his words of defense were not just empty gestures. It was about earning back the trust of the woman who had truly taught him what integrity meant. He had to go find her, not just for Oakhaven, but for himself, to finally claim his own redemption. The echo of Malcolm's words hung in the air, a declaration that would irrevocably alter the course of Oakhaven and the lives within it. Now that declaration would lead him on a desperate journey, one that would redefine the meaning of home, family, and forgiveness. The note clutched in Malcolm's hand felt heavier than any corporate contract he had ever signed. Ellie was gone. The shock of Seraphina's departure had been a tempest. Ellie's absence was a chilling void. He couldn't live with it. Oakhaven, even without Seraphina's cold ambition, felt incomplete, a body without its soul. He had to find her, not just for the estate, not for his family's comfort, but for himself. This wasn't about demanding her return, it was about earning it, about atoning for his profound failure. Malcolm didn't wait. He didn't send staff or private investigators. This was a journey he had to undertake himself. He grabbed his car keys, his heart a raw, open wound. He drove not back to the sterile gleam of his downtown office, but to the familiar, well-worn roads that led to the quiet corners of the town surrounding Oakhaven. Ellie had always lived in a modest home, a small cottage nestled on the outskirts, a place filled with simple beauty and vibrant life. He knew the way by heart, having walked that path countless times as a child, sneaking away from formal lessons to hear her stories. But the cottage was empty. The windows were dark, the small garden, usually bursting with color, was untended. A new wave of despair washed over him. Had she left town? Had she truly cut ties, taking her heart, and with it a piece of his own, away forever? He wouldn't give up. He drove to the local community center, a hub where Ellie often volunteered. The elderly women there, their faces lined with wisdom and shared history, looked at him with a mixture of surprise and knowing sadness. Ellie? Oh, she needed a little break, dear. Gone to stay with her sister in North Carolina for a spell. Said she just needed some quiet. They gave him the address, their eyes assessing him, a silent judgment in their gaze. Malcolm swallowed hard. He knew they understood. They knew Ellie, and they knew what she had endured. The drive to North Carolina was long, the miles stretching out before him like a physical manifestation of his guilt. Each mile was a moment for reflection, a forced confrontation with his inner demons. He replayed every hurtful word Serafina had uttered, every dismissive glance, and with agonizing clarity, every instance of his own crippling silence. He remembered Ellie's unwavering loyalty, how she had always stood by him even when he was just a clumsy, insecure boy. How many times had he sought her quiet counsel, her unwavering faith, and he had let her be humiliated. The shame burned hotter than ever. How could I have been so blind, so weak? He was a millionaire, a titan of industry, but in that moment he felt like the smallest, most contemptible man alive. Finally, after hours of driving, he found it. A small, neatly kept house, adorned with bright red geraniums on the porch. He pulled up, the tires crunching on a gravel driveway, the sound announcing his arrival in the quiet afternoon. His heart hammered against his ribs. This was it, the moment of truth. He walked up the short path, every step heavy with apprehension, yet light with purpose. He saw her through the screen door, sitting on the porch swing, a faded quilt draped over her lap, a book open in her hands. She looked peaceful, a quiet strength radiating from her. He knocked softly. Ellie looked up, her eyes, usually so warm, now held a flicker of surprise, then something guarded. She didn't look angry, just tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. "Malcolm," she said, her voice soft, devoid of accusation, but also of the usual warmth. "Malcolm," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. He couldn't force the words, they had to come from the deepest part of his being. He didn't offer excuses, no convoluted explanations. He just offered the truth, raw and unvarnished. I am so sorry." He took a step closer, his hands held open in a gesture of utter vulnerability. "There's no excuse for my silence, no justification for allowing you to be treated that way. I was a coward, Ellie. I let fear and pride and a superficial marriage blind me. I stood by while you, the woman who taught me what true strength is, who loved me like her own, were humiliated. I was wrong, and I have carried that shame with me ever since." Ellie watched him, her eyes unwavering, searching his eyes for the truth. She didn't interrupt. When he finished, the silence stretched between them, heavy but not suffocating. It was a silence filled with the weight of unspoken pain and the fragile hope of reconciliation. Finally, she spoke, her voice laced with a gentle sorrow. "It wasn't just the words, Malcolm," she said, her eyes fixed on his. "The words were cruel, yes, but it was the silence that echoed louder. The silence of the boy I raised, the silence of the man I believed in. That silence, that was the cut that went deepest." She explained, not with anger, but with the quiet weariness of a heart that had been stretched too thin. "I had to leave, Malcolm. My spirit couldn't take it anymore. A home is where you are respected, where you belong, not just tolerated." Malcolm nodded. his throat tight. He understood. He had failed her. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I came here to ask for it, and to ask you to come home. Oakhaven isn't Oakhaven without you, Ellie. It's just a house. And I need you there, not as an employee, not as the help, as my family, as the anchor that reminds me what truly matters." He pleaded not with authority, but with the raw humility of a man who had finally seen the error of his ways. "Please, Ellie, come home." She looked away then, her gaze drifting to the horizon, lost in thought. Malcolm waited, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. After what felt like an eternity, she sighed, a deep, tired sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years. Slowly she turned back to him, her eyes meeting his. This time he saw a glimmer of warmth, a flicker of understanding, and perhaps a spark of the forgiveness he desperately craved. "Finish your tea," she murmured, gesturing to a half-full cup on a small table beside her swing. Her voice was still quiet, but the words were a beacon, a tiny, fragile sign of hope. Relief flooded through Malcolm, so potent it almost buckled his knees. He didn't rush, didn't celebrate with a shout, he simply nodded, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. He sat down opposite her, picked up the teacup, savoring the warmth, the familiarity, and the quiet understanding that filled the space between them. The road back to Oakhaven wouldn't be as long this time. He had found his way home, and with Ellie by his side, Oakhaven would finally begin to heal. The drive back to Oakhaven felt immeasurably shorter than the journey away. The Mercedes glided up the long gravel driveway, the familiar crunch of stones now sounding like a welcome home. Ellie sat beside Malcolm, a quiet smile gracing her lips, the weariness in her eyes replaced by a calm, familiar light. As the grand house came into view, something profound shifted within Malcolm. It was no longer just a house, grand and imposing. With Ellie beside him, it was truly home again. Aunt Beatrice and Silas were waiting on the porch, their faces etched with relief and undisguised joy. There were no dramatic declarations, no tearful embraces, just a series of warm, knowing smiles and a silent understanding that spoke volumes. Aunt Beatrice took Ellie's hands, squeezing them gently, her eyes conveying all the unspoken affection. Silas, ever the pragmatist, merely offered a sincere nod, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips. The quiet welcome was more impactful than any grand celebration, a testament to the authentic bonds that truly mattered. Ellie's return was a transformative event for Oakhaven. It was as if the very air inside the estate became lighter, filled with a renewed sense of purpose and warmth. The lingering chill of Seraphina's presence seemed to dissipate, replaced by the comforting hum of a home finally made whole. But Malcolm knew this wasn't just about restoring Oakhaven to its former glory. It was about rebuilding it on a stronger, more honest foundation. He began subtly reversing some of Seraphina's jarring modernizations. The harsh, minimalist art pieces were quietly removed, replaced by beloved ancestral portraits that whispered stories of resilience and heritage. The cold, impersonal furniture was gradually replaced with warmer, more inviting pieces, reminiscent of Oakhaven's original charm. This wasn't merely about aesthetics, it was a profound act of restoration, a symbolic rejection of superficiality and a commitment to authentic values. Malcolm sought out antique furniture makers, local artisans, and even researched Oakhaven's original blueprints, ensuring that every restoration honored the estate's rich history. He understood that true legacy wasn't about erasing the past, but honoring it, building upon it. Malcolm's growth wasn't limited to the physical space. He actively sought Ellie's advice, not just on household matters, but on decisions about the estate's future. He involved her in discussions about the grounds, the gardens, even the family's charitable initiatives. He treated her not just with respect, but with profound reverence, acknowledging her as an indispensable pillar of his life and family. He'd often sit with her in the evenings, not for formal discussions, but simply to listen to her quiet wisdom, absorbing lessons he'd neglected for too long. He realized that Ellie possessed a profound emotional intelligence, an understanding of people and life that no amount of business acumen could teach. The news of Serafina's abrupt departure, followed by Ellie's quiet return, rippled through the local community. For the tight-knit Black community surrounding Oakhaven, a community that had known the Sterling family for generations, this was more than just gossip. It was a reaffirmation. They knew Ellie. They knew her steadfast character and the respect she commanded. Malcolm's public defense of her and his subsequent definitive action resonated deeply. It was a story of a powerful man choosing principle over prestige, choosing integrity over the superficial demands of society. People offered quiet nods of approval, shared knowing smiles, and sent over comforting dishes, subtly acknowledging their support for Malcolm and their quiet celebration of Ellie's deserved return. Malcolm was learning that true wealth wasn't measured in balance sheets or social standing. It was about the integrity of one's character, the strength of one's relationships, and the legacy of love and respect one built. He found a peace at Oakhaven that had eluded him in the dizzying climb to success. The house was no longer a gilded cage or a symbol of distant responsibility. It was a sanctuary, a place where his soul could finally rest and truly belong. But Malcolm knew that simple restoration wasn't enough. He had to make an undeniable, lasting statement. A statement that would solidify Ellie's place, not just in Oakhaven, but in the very fabric of the Sterling legacy, ensuring that what happened to her could never happen again. He wanted to provide not just security, but true ownership, recognizing her profound, invaluable contribution. One quiet afternoon, he called Aunt Beatrice, Silas, and Ellie into the ornate library, the very room where generations of Sterlings had made their most important decisions. He handed a set of legal documents to Ellie. Her brow furrowed as she looked at them, then at him, confused. "Ellie," Malcolm began, his voice steady, "you once told me you didn't leave Oakhaven because, despite everything, it was your home. And you were right. This has always been your home, and always will be." He took a deep breath. "But you were more than just a caretaker, more than just family. You helped build this legacy. You held us together when we faltered. You are Oakhaven." Then came the profound, unexpected twist. "Effective today," Malcolm continued, his gaze unwavering, "and thanks to these documents, you are no longer just living here. You are formally a co-owner of Oakhaven Estate. A significant, irrevocable share of this land, this house, this legacy is now legally yours. It is a small acknowledgement of a debt that can never truly be repaid, a formal recognition of the indelible mark you have left on this family, on this home, and on me." Ellie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes welling up with unshed tears. Aunt Beatrice looked on, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, a look of profound pride and love on her face. Silas, for once, was utterly speechless, his jaw slightly agape, before a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "Malcolm, Ellie began, her voice trembling. "No, Ellie," Malcolm interrupted gently. "It's not a gift. It's a truth. You helped make this place what it is. You kept its heart beating. This is where you belong, now and always. And these documents ensure that no one ever again can treat you as anything less than the beloved essential foundation of this family. For Ellie, this wasn't just about financial security. It was about profound, unequivocal validation. It was the ultimate acknowledgement of her worth, her dignity, her decades of unwavering love and sacrifice. It was Malcolm, finally, fully and publicly, rectifying his past wrongs and securing her place not just in his heart, but in the very history of Oakhaven. Oakhaven was finally breathing again, a testament to the fact that true legacy isn't inherited from a bank account, but woven from the threads of courage, compassion, and the unyielding bonds of love that truly make a house a home. Years flowed like a gentle river through the heart of Oakhaven. The grand estate, once a stage for silent suffering and public humiliation, had transformed. It hummed now with a quiet, authentic joy, a testament to the fact that true restoration isn't just about polishing old silver. It's about mending broken bonds and fortifying foundations with integrity and love. Malcolm Sterling, no longer the conflicted man caught between two worlds, now moved through Oakhaven with a deep sense of peace. His success in the tech world had continued to soar, but his greatest achievement, he often reflected, wasn't measured in balance sheets or stock prices. It was measured in the restored warmth in Ellie's eyes, the knowing smiles exchanged with Aunt Beatrice and Silas, and the profound, quiet contentment that now filled the halls of his ancestral home. He understood now that the true weight of responsibility wasn't just to his name or his fortune, but to the people who had poured their lives into making that name and that fortune meaningful. Oakhaven had taught him that home was far more than brick and mortar. It was a feeling of belonging, a sanctuary where one was seen, respected, and loved for who they were, not for what they owned or how they conformed. It was a place where history wasn't just preserved in dusty archives, but lived out in the daily rhythms of kindness and mutual care. Ellie, now formally a co-owner of Oakhaven, moved with an even deeper sense of peace and belonging. Her presence was a constant, gentle reminder of the values that truly anchored the Sterling family. She continued to manage the household with her characteristic grace and efficiency, but now it was a partnership, a collaboration built on equal footing and profound respect. The community often spoke of her, not just as Mrs. Vance, the Sterling's housekeeper, but as Mrs. Ellie, the pillar of Oakhaven, a true testament to her enduring strength and the unyielding recognition she had finally received. Her story became a quiet legend in the community, a powerful narrative of dignity persevering through disrespect, of silent strength ultimately being honored with resounding triumph. The story of Oakhaven, of Malcolm and Ellie, offers profound lessons for all of us, especially those who have navigated the turbulent waters of injustice, betrayal, or quiet marginalization. First, the deafening cost of silence. Malcolm's inaction, his avoidance of conflict, almost cost him the most precious bond in his life. How many times do we, like Malcolm, witness microaggressions, hear subtle insults, or see someone we care about being diminished, yet choose to look away? We tell ourselves we're keeping the peace, avoiding drama. But as Malcolm learned, silence isn't peace, it's complicity. It enables the very harm we wish to avoid. It erodes trust, chips away at dignity, and can leave scars far deeper than any spoken word. The lesson is stark. True courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to speak truth, even when your voice trembles, even when it means challenging the comfortable status quo. Second, the transformative power of genuine humility and profound repentance. Malcolm's redemption wasn't quick or easy. It required him to shed his pride, confront his own cowardice, and journey outside his comfort zone. He didn't send a proxy, he went himself, admitting his faults not just to Ellie, but to himself. Forgiveness, both given and received, is a healing balm, but it can only truly begin when genuine remorse is offered and genuine change is demonstrated. It's a reminder that even when we stumble, even when we fail those we love, the path to healing is always open, paved with humility and a sincere commitment to do better. Third, the unshakable resilience of the human spirit and the true meaning of worth. Ellie, despite relentless attempts to diminish her, never lost her dignity. She held on to her inner strength, her values, and her quiet self-respect. Her worth was never defined by Seraphina's cruel words or Malcolm's initial inaction. It was inherent. For those who have ever felt unseen, undervalued, or dismissed, particularly those from marginalized communities who constantly face systemic disrespect, Ellie's story is a beacon. It reminds us that our worth is not given by others. It is found within ourselves, nurtured by our character, and cannot be taken away by external forces, no matter how powerful. Finally, the enduring legacy of human connection. In a world obsessed with fleeting trends and material possessions, Oakhaven stands as a monument to what truly endures: the bonds of loyalty, the warmth of family, the profound respect for those who uplift us, regardless of their societal station. True wealth isn't found in bank accounts or exclusive addresses. It resides in the integrity of our character and the depth of our relationships. It's a legacy not of power, but of profound humanity. As the sun sets over Oakhaven, casting long shadows of history and hope across its ancient walls, it reminds us that some legacies are written in stone, in grand gestures and vast fortunes. But the most enduring, the most precious ones are etched in the heart, in the quiet acts of kindness, the courage to speak up, the humility to seek forgiveness, and the unyielding bonds of love that truly make a house a home. If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition or a surge of motivation within your own heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. What did Malcolm's journey teach you? How has Ellie's quiet strength inspired you? Like this video. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the incredible power within us all. And don't forget to share this message of resilience and redemption with your friends. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and always remember to fight for what's right.